Hi, I'm Melissa Idris, and this is The Future is Female, the show where we find the extraordinary in every woman. Loud and fearless, Joanne Kam is arguably Malaysia's most famous female comedian, making audiences laugh with her raunchy jokes on stage and her risqué sense of humour. But today she joins me at Common Ground in Damansara Heights to enjoy this beautiful view and to get real about what it's like to be a woman in comedy today. Well, Joanne, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. Now, I want to talk to you about your career. Let's start there.
Okay.
It's been 25 years now.
26 now.
26 years now
and counting.
that you've been in comedy.
Yes.
Let's start there. Let's start from how you've evolved how you think you've evolved from the very beginning until now.
Well, you see, when I first started comedy, it was in Boom Boom Room, Singapore. So that was about actually 26, 27 years ago. My goodness, longer, right? I am that old. But here's the thing though, when we first started comedy in Singapore, it was me and Kumar. So Kumar started first, 6 months later, he brought me in. And at that time, there was no laptop. I mean, we had still like with the conventional old computer.
Right.
You need to, computers were not even easily accessible. There was no World Wide Web. There was no handphones that you could Google jokes on. So what we actually did was we go to the bookshops and we'll grab every joke book in the shelf.
Wow.
Like, so everything from worst mother-in-law jokes, father-in-law jokes, all this, naughty jokes, every volume, and then we'll take it back. We'll digest the jokes, and then me and Kumar will figure out which are the ones that is suitable for him or for me, and we will take those jokes, turn it into something personal.
Oh.
Okay, like as if, my uncle went to this restaurant instead of Tom went into this restaurant.
Okay.
So try to localize it and made it into our stories. So during that time, mind you, this was 7 years ago, we could do that because, jokes were not easily accessible.
Right.
People were not forwarding jokes to, their fellow colleagues. So with that in mind, how even writing jokes have now evolved into where I write my own material.
Right. So how do you do that? How do you approach crafting, say, material for a new set, right? I'm always curious to know this about comedians because, I mean, it's a combination, isn't it, Joanne? It's a combination of your personal, it's a combination of observational, and also trying to find the absurd in everyday life.
Yeah, because in the last 15 years, there has been a new insertion of comedy. And you can't, how I did comedy before and how I did comedy now, 26 years later, it's so different.
Right.
Like before, I used to take all these jokes from joke books and then, regurgitate them on stage. But now, you have to write your own material. And you need to, like what you say, you have to write from experience because it needs to be believable. And with stand-up comedy especially, I think a lot of comedians when they talk about stories, it's always tinted with a bit of truth.
So how do you approach it, Joanne? How do you approach, injecting the personal into your material? Because I'm sure there's a part of it that you want to keep sacred, that you don't want to put too much of your personal life out there for the comedy.
The thing is this, I've lived quite a life, so I can figure out which one I want to tell, which one I don't want to tell. So you pick which are the ones that you are willing to share with your audience, and you must understand it is sharing your personal adventures, kind of like your personal adventures. But there's also what you call this, a lot of environment as well. When you look at people like living in Malaysia, people living in Asia, and people living abroad. So when you go overseas, you can talk about your experience living in a culture such as
Right.
multiracial as this and turn that into a joke and to an aspect. I think with comedy is always your views on the world around you and making sure that the audience gets it and there is some, how would I say, familiarness, and
Right.
that's what people want to hear.
They want to get to know you,
Correct.
right? But you also want to protect a certain part of Joanne. So Joanne Kam on stage is not Joanne Kam outside.
Yes.
Because that's a different side of you. You have a daughter.
Yes.
Do you use her, like anecdotes of her? You know, she must do funny things at home. Do you use her as part of your material?
Well, not as my material per se as yet, because I have a certain style for my material, but I have
Slightly risque?
Yeah, slightly risque. But I have talked about her in my one-woman show, La La Lian, which we toured last year. So those who came for the show got a glimpse of my daughter, you know, how I gave birth to her, what were the conditions, what were the, and how my environment was at that time, because I am a single mom. So in that true aspect, a bit more of me was on stage rather than what you see at the moment in comedy clubs. So there's two very different approach to telling comedy.
Right.
You do one set that is the comedy clubs and the venues that you're going to visit, you know, and perform, and that is maybe that will give you your range, your kind of style, like the risque humor and all that. And then in a one-woman show, you are allowed to delve a little bit more, and that is up to you as to how much you want to give to the audience and bear it all.
Well, tell me more about this one-woman show, because that's really interesting to me. I don't know about you, Joanne, but I find it really difficult when someone says, how does it feel to be a female ... a female comedian, a female leader, a female politician? I mean, a man would never get asked that question, so I'm not going to ask that of you. But there's no denying that this is a male-dominated industry.
Yes, it is.
So talk to me about having a one-woman show in a male-dominated industry.
Well, the thing is this, I started comedy way before any of the boys came about here. I think I started first, and then after that it was Harif that followed suit. I do admit opportunities for the guys are wider. For women, we need to make our opportunities. There is no point crying over spilt milk. The world is such. But if you are daring enough, and if you push enough, and if you don't give up, I mean, I don't complain. Of course, any woman who's dealt with a lot of issues, you know, pertaining how can they move forward and all, sometimes we end up complaining too much. And not to say that I don't, I do, but instead of feeling so bad and upset or even hurt by the fact that no one's giving me opportunities, I make my own opportunities. So even with my one-woman show, La La Lian, when we first opened, I didn't know if I'm going to have enough money to pay the theatre after. I didn't know if it was going to work, because the subject matter and the story for La La Lian was so different.
Were you worried that people would not want to come and watch one female comedian?
No, I believe that people will come and watch me.
Okay.
But I didn't know how well it will be received.
Because it was so raw and vulnerable.
Because it was raw, because it was my life story, because it wasn't the usual risque jokes where I talk about, you know, my body parts and all that. And that's what people who are my fans
who know you for that, right?
Yeah, they want to hear that.
Right.
So for me, when I started that one-woman show journey, I didn't know how people are going to react to my stories about me being a baby, me growing up in Ipoh, my father in Penang, you know, my father's death, my mom's death, me working in Singapore, you know, me falling in love with all these men who were not really men, you know, all these things, because there were so many different aspects of the whole story.
Right.
It wasn't just one component. It was
Well, it's your life story.
Yeah, it's
right?
my life story. So we took the audience from me being a baby to me growing up as a young girl, you know, to me growing into the entertainment industry, you know, from me having all this love roller coaster to me being pregnant with my daughter, me being a single mom, and then of course we only had 1 hour.
Yeah, and you have so much to compress
So
into.
much to compress. And this is, of course, taking material that I've written for a biography book.
Oh, and make it into comedy.
Yes, and then restructuring the whole text and then putting in points where it need to be comedy.
You know, the thing is, right, I'm wondering whether there is a stereotype that a woman in comedy has to fight against, you know, in terms of jokes, right? I think most audiences who come to a comedy show, they expect, you know, women comedians to say to period jokes, for instance, or sex jokes, or you know, there's a certain stereotype, and I'm just wondering if you've had to fight against that.
Well, the thing is, when I first started, number one, there was no female comedians anyway.
There's a number now.
Yeah, there's a few now. You know, in Malaysia, I think we have more than perhaps in Singapore as well. We have a lot of open micers. And you'll be amazed, things that I talked about like 26 years ago that were taboo, maybe sex, period, whatever it was, you know. Right now, it doesn't seem so awkward because right now, the new girls are talking about even deeper stuff.
Okay, so there's normalization.
Yeah, there's
of that.
normalization, but we have moved even as gender or even as how we receive comedy.
Okay.
So when I first started, you must understand, this was in the early 90s where women don't go up there and talk about who they venture out with, you know, what they like to do.
You had to choose your words carefully.
Well, I didn't choose my words carefully at that time. I certainly won't now. But now you're seeing more girls doing it. But also because it's more rampant now, like I always advise the newer girls, I say don't say or use that word unless you're doing it as a shock factor. And if you're doing it as a shock factor, it is not necessary.
Right. Well, what are your thoughts on tackling difficult issues in comedy? Because, you know, especially in the wake of the Me Too movement, how do you deal with those types of discussions or jokes, even, say, your fellow comedians, male comedians who say sexist jokes on stage? How do you deal with that?
Well, honestly, the truth is I have found out that it's not only just male comics here in Malaysia, but also international comics.
Oh,
you know, I have attended international comic show where after a while I found the person's joke to become very sexist, especially in this day and age. And even right now, I've also seen open mic shows where a certain individual will go up and his jokes were so sexist. But here's the funny part. The older boys, I mean, not as old as I am, but the ones who have been in the industry for 5 years, 8 years, they who run the open mics will actually, like before I can even, like the minute I look at the boys, I could see the boys nodding to themselves.
So it's the men who are censoring other men who make sexist jokes on stage.
Or once the person comes down, they pull him aside and say, dude,
that's not acceptable.
You can't say this, dude.
Oh, so within the
men
industry itself.
themselves who are becoming more aware. And that's what we want. You know, because how many times have you heard it? If women go up there and say, oh, that was a sexist joke, you shouldn't do. There's always that fine line that they're going to throw you back. Oh, she's just an angry feminist. How many times have you heard the word angry feminist?
Yes.
You know, but what's nice in this community right now, well, I can only say about Malaysia, but I'm sure in the US as well, where the guys are like a bit more, what's the word? Woke. They are woke. And they're like, wait, did he just say that? Oh no, that.
Well, that's
you
good.
know?
That's heartening.
And then they'll come down and they will like, it doesn't need me to go and say, dude, you know. They will go and say, dude, like, hey, that's not cool, I think you should change your material.
That is very heartening to know that other men are, encouraging other men.
And that's what we need. It
Yeah.
shouldn't be just about us. It should be an inclusion where it's both male and female, and that's the only way to advance,
John, I also have to ask, on the same vein of this
Okay.
conversation, talking about tackling social issues like toxic masculinity, like, gender equality. How does comedy allow for conversations to happen, especially, say, on difficult topics? I'm wondering, is there anything taboo in comedy? Can you talk about, child marriage? Can you talk about rape? Can you make humor out of such difficult issues and traumatic issues like that?
So recently, I've had the privilege to hear very strong, opinionated female comics who are, to me, are my warriors.
Oh.
Women like Margaret Cho. Margaret Cho came down to Singapore and KL. I caught her in Singapore. And she does talk about being sexually abused, raped, but she does it in such a way where it's her way, and you get roped in by her storytelling.
Right.
So it's also highlighting the cause, but also understanding that your duty as a comedian is to make people realize the cause, but not feeling, bad about it when they leave their
right.
room.
It's a delicate balance,
It's
right?
a very delicate
You want to make people
balance.
aware of a really difficult topic,
Correct.
but you don't want to bum them out so much that they leave feeling upset, because
Yeah.
it's about entertainment.
Yeah, it's about entertainment. So recently we finished an all-female comedy variety musical show. It's called the Pompon Show. Me and Charmaine did something very different where two of us came out to welcome our audience. Usually it's just me, or usually if I'm leading the show, then I'll do my 10-minute. But this time around we did very Oscar style where three female comics come out. But two, me and her,
Yeah.
we did a duo. And for the welcoming, we wanted to put certain highlight certain issues that women are facing. One of them was sexual harassment, of course, with the Me Too movement and all that. And when I first got the script with Charmaine, we looked at it, and there was, it's so hard to talk about things like what you say, rape or even sexual harassment or child marriages. But how do we do it in a way that you let them know that these things out there exist? It needs to be dealt with, but you're here to enjoy a comedy show.
Right.
So we did rewrite one where, it was a sexual harassment thing, and we turned that into a joke.
Because comedy is
Towards the
about
end.
About social commentary as
Yes.
well. It's about the observational. So there's no denying that it's happening here in Malaysia.
Of
So
course.
part of our social fabric. And how do you weave that into your material? And I think it's important too, right?
Yes. How we did it, besides the welcoming part, we also wrote a little skit where we turned the tables around.
Oh.
So it was, the premise of the skit was in a club, and two guys are going to this club because it's boys' night. And the two guys was, of course, played by me and Charmaine, so we look ridiculous. I look like Jolo,
that's where he is.
Okay, And we come to this boys' night where we just want to have fun and dance, and these two girls are being creepy and trying to get us to go with them,
tables have
So
turned.
tables have turned, but of course it's just a 5-minute skit. But with that, you are letting the audience enjoy, laugh about themselves, but still
Aware.
aware that, hey, this is what girls are facing when we go out on girls'
sure.
night, So yeah, it's dropping little things like that, but making it, ensuring that it is still a comedy, ensuring that it's still entertaining, because you have that responsibility for your audience. So I think with comedy is actually the best way we can figure out how to, let it out there.
Because everyone has their guard down, doesn't it?
Correct.
So just to come back to this idea, as you were saying, Charmaine, a fellow comedian with you on stage, and I'm wondering, are we past the age now where there used to be one woman and not two? So, in a lineup of comedians, there would be mostly male comedians, and then they'll have a female comedian, but never two female comedians. It's almost as though it's tokenism to have diversity.
Okay, it is still a token to have diversity, because there's not many female comedians out there. Even in New York, one of my friends who is a Singaporean Chinese female comic, she gets booked because she is female.
Oh.
All right?
And how do you feel about that?
If the opportunity comes, why not? Right now, even in very male-centric rooms, they will seek female out. But here's the thing though, you need to prove to them that you're good. And it's the same thing with, like, even for me, if I take on new comedians, new female comedians, because that's my goal. My goal is to mentor and nurture female in comedy. But even with that, when I want to put a professional show on, I will pick only the ones who are good.
Is there a fear of, if she gets the job, then I won't get the job? So you're going head to head with other female comics?
Not at all.
Okay.
Because we've come to a state where I'm encouraging female comics to help each other out. I've been doing this for 26, 27 years. All right? There is so much variety in comedy, in entertainment, where someone may not appreciate my risqué humor, but they may appreciate perhaps Charmaine's humor, and if they want to get her for a job or a show, by all means, I encourage. In fact, there have been times when people, when I can't do the jobs, and I give them out to the rest. But here's the thing, women need to help women.
Sure.
You should never feel, jealous or feel threatened. I think that's the word. Once women stop feeling threatened that the other woman is going to take their jobs, going to take their men, going to take their shoes, going to take their dogs, that's the only way we can help other women. But the thing is this, you need to be good.
Yeah, okay. So merit-based first,
merit-based,
and gender is secondary.
For me, merit is always first, and then gender is secondary. But I've, like with the rest of the female new ones, the newbies, I say you get together, you support each other, and you put on your own stuff.
But as much as we wish it was merit-based, Joanne, is there a gender pay gap in comedy?
Of course.
Do you get paid less than your male counterparts?
Well, I don't get as much opportunities.
Oh.
Yeah, because it's still a very boys. Like, for example, if one comic managed to get, a gig in Thailand, I could be his friend. But for some odd reason, he will always call the other male comic, So I'm like, yo, dude, I'm right here, dude.
Not as many opportunities.
Dude. Well, they gang together.
Okay, so it's a bit of a boys' club.
It is a boys' club.
So we need a girls' club too.
There is a girls' club going on, and it's nice to know that every female comic overseas that have come to Malaysia, like I interview most of them, right, for my online show. They have the same philosophies, they have the same issues, but they are also in a place where if you tell them, like, hey, I'm going to the UK, you think you can help me, I want to jump on some room, they will help as well.
That's wonderful.
So there is a community there. But yeah, you need to play where the boys are. You need to play where the boys are.
And that was my conversation with Joanne Kam, the queen of Malaysian stand-up comedy. Now, I'll be back again same time next week on the show, The Future is Female, talking to inspirational women. But before I go, let me leave you with these words of wisdom from the author G.D. Anderson. Feminism isn't about making women strong. Women are already strong. It's about changing the way the world perceives that strength. Till next week, I'm Melissa Idris, and remember, the future is female.